Okay, we have a video from Stanford University, and we have four different speakers speaking about the electronic medical record with different perspectives. This first speaker doesn't talk so much, not is less interested in the newest technology. He feels that the correct implementation, the right sort of change management when you're moving from one system to another, training, and collaboration among the staff is really what's important. And the fact that each of the hospitals that he's seen gone live with an EMR has some flexibility in terms of how they implement the system. So let's listen to this first speaker, what he has to say about this.
So we've had 109 organizations, mostly from the U.S., but 7 outside of the U.S. in the U.K., Australia, and Singapore, who have participated in an end-user satisfaction survey that has gone out to all of their independent care providers and oftentimes their nurses. Several organizations who are here today have participated. The bad news is that primary care is the most satisfied specialty of pretty much all the specialties. So we've collected over 20,000 perspectives from independent care providers. The exciting headline that I'm excited to report today is that there's huge variation between organizations. And that is a really, really critical thing to note. Thank you. Sorry about that. Maybe I turned it off. Is that better? There we go. Here we go. I'm sure you can hear me in the back. I know my voice. So what's really exciting is that there we go. Yeah. What's really exciting is that there's huge variation between organizations. So while less than half of physicians, and we have almost 20,000 who've responded, less than half of physicians feel that their EMR enables quality care. We've come across a half dozen organizations where their physicians, over 75% of their physicians feel that the EMR enables high quality care. What's really, really interesting is that those organizations are doing very different things than what we thought that they were going to be doing. We thought these were going to be the most technological, the most experienced, the cutting edge organizations. Instead, these are organizations where their physicians highly value their training. They know the limits of their EMR, and they've taken more time than your average organizations in training. These are organizations with high teamwork. And these are organizations where physicians realize that it's a myth that the EMR is going to be intuitive enough that I can just pick it up and use it out of the box. And these are organizations that are realizing that if they have rapid optimization around their EMR, which is the lowest satisfaction area in the Harris poll, that they can really progress very quickly with it. And they are not organizations with high utilizations of voice technology. They're not organizations that are necessarily on the newest version of their EMR. These are not organizations that have some sort of whiz-bang technology solution that are making them successful. They're using change management to get there. So anyway, some very exciting, that's why it's been so exciting and rewarding to listen to these organizations, because we've learned a lot about what is the EMR as we talk about 10 years in the future. What is the profile of a really successful organization? It's not their technology, it's their change management.
That's interesting. Lloyd, I mean, I think you view the potential of EHRs as a way of really sort of changing the way we deliver medicine. And so I'm interested in really what you find most exciting right now. I mean, where do you think we'll see the most change? And I'll note both the time you predicted and what you predict. But
well, I think they're
So this speaker is less concerned with the implementations. He's looking out into the distant future, artificial intelligence, instantaneous decision support, sort of gathering all the information that's out there, the rich amount of information we have, and using that for instantaneous decision support, clinical decision support, as well as AI. So let's listen to this second speaker, completely different view and opinion on EMRs.
Really two areas. One is building upon what Taylor said. It's not just the interface with the EHR, but really rethinking the role of the EHR and how it can be a useful adjunct in the actual care delivery process. And that means in decision support, so that people don't have to remember the symptoms associated with this syndrome that I described, that instantly there's support for providers in making decisions, and that we can really use technology to enable and further the relationship between care providers and patients. That's one area. A second area is that there's a huge amount of data oftentimes trapped within the EHR today. And how can we democratize that data in a way that it can be amenable to the type of AI machine learning approaches that in so many other sectors have yielded transformative impact. And there's an absolute need in medicine today to improve our value, that is better quality for lower cost. And we've already seen in the examples where we have drawn out information from the data that exists, how that process of value enhancement can be furthered by appropriately used EHRs. But I also have the sense we've only scratched the surface, and there's so much more we could be doing. So both in terms of the interaction between care providers and patients, viewing EHRs as adjunctive and contributory in a positive sense of that, and in enabling the type of analytics that we know are going to help to transform value in healthcare today.
Judy, you're next. You've worn also a number of different hats, and I'm interested, you were part of the federal government's efforts to shape the EHR. You've been at health systems trying to actually use the darn thing, and you are now working at IBM. I'm really curious where you see, after what has been really a decade of finger pointing, where do you see the most traction in terms of people working together to actually achieve something?
Yeah,
So this third speaker looks at more immediate opportunities to leverage the EMR for patient engagement and patient portals. So let's listen to her next.
I think the largest area where I'm seeing traction is using the EHR in more of an ecosystem. In other words, not putting everything in the EHR, but thinking of it as a core tool, but then surrounding it with other systems that might be able to support it. I think the other thing is, you brought it up when you had your opening remarks in terms of, what's the purpose of the EHR really? And we talked about the fact of patient care. So we can't forget that it was the EHR that launched the capability of patient portals. And that has been a huge boon to the way we think about care in the United States, because it has brought patients in. It's not just cracking the door and saying, let's get you engaged in the things we happen to let you get involved in. But in fact, it was engulfing them and saying, we're going to give you your lab results. We're going to let you look at your x-ray results. We're going to open our notes to you. And I think that has done more for that idea that this is about the way we live and not about our episodic encounters in an acute care organization. And that's what I think is the power of the EHR right now.
Don, I know you also have industry background, and now you're at HHS. And I'm interested in where you see the federal government, moving ahead to try and make it easier, to make it, EHRs talk to one another or reduce or increase the regulatory burden as it may be.
Well, let's see. It's the Trump administration, so increasing the regulatory burden is not on the agenda.
So this speaker works for the ONC, the Office of National Coordinator. You may not have heard that term before, but the ONC, the main drive is to have support collaboration among the various healthcare vendors for data integration. And he'll talk about open source APIs, application program interfaces, and that's really the thrust of the speaker and what his mission is at the ONC.
It's interesting. So I went into this business to have EHRs do automation, so that we sort of forget they're actually computers. Right? What other industries use computers to make more work for itself? We have a campus, literally built on automation, and yet medicine is the one holdout in a funny kind of way. And so I think the 2028 vision is really sort of enterprise automation, right? Because the real issue in American healthcare is affordability. At least, I think that's if you went out to the public and asked them if you, that's the real issue. We are a very labor-intensive operation. I did a study looking at phone calls when I was at Ohio State, and of the 130,000 phone calls a day at that institution, 800-bed health system, roughly half were 60 seconds or less, right? So they're exchanging one fact. Tell me that some large chunk of that's not automatable. So I think we're going to see a very different view of EHRs as really enterprise software, the way you look at an SAP or, pick your favorite vendor here. And so I think that's the real goal and that will, most of our things around decision-making in healthcare have been outlier reduction, right? Rules-based expert systems. I was a grad student with Ted Shortliff, literally on the dirt this building was built on. But that's really outlier reduction. And what we really need to do is reduce the central variance of care. So at ONC, we're doing a number of things. Most of them are really under 21st century cures, which was Congress's statement that, hey, we have widespread adoption. We saw the graph, but there's two things that are missing, which, interesting enough, were the short and the long-term priorities in the survey. Short-term, lots of usability problems with this, and has been pointed out, not surprising, you have these documentation tools. I would say we don't have time to get into it here necessarily, but I think there's grounds for optimism on what jointly CMS and ONC are finding, and there'll be a formal report as required by Congress on what some of the burdens are. They include documentation, they include the whole world of prior auth, and they include the whole world, the way we do quality measures and the search for value. So I think you're going to see some real progress there from a variety of different approaches and technologies. Interoperability is what ONC spends a lot of energy on. Cures mandates, just folks may know, there's a prohibition against information blocking. Cures mandates the National Exchange Organization, the Trust Exchange Framework, work in progress. And finally, the most interesting thing, I think, for sort of a tech audience are open APIs without special effort. So having open application programming interfaces, we believe the way it is done in many, many industries is going to change the nature of what's out there, right? If you look at, the Uber Lyft paradigm where you've combined open APIs, you look at travel, you look at banking. In England, all the banks and brokerage houses are forced to have an open API to be able to exchange information. And maybe most spectacularly, you look at retail and the Amazon business model, which is an API model, right? Most of what they sell is actually from third parties. So we think all of those things are going to create an ecosystem that is going to absolutely transform what we have had a very, very narrow vision of up until now in the electronic health record.
So that concludes our fourth speaker from Stanford. I hope you found that each perspective provided some other, interesting information about challenges and opportunities in the future. And that concludes this particular video. Thanks for watching.